Good morning. This is Nicola. She's from Rutland. Hi, Nicola. How are you?
Morning. I'm okay, thank you.
Oh, good. Would you like to start by telling us briefly about your stroke and what led up to it, and just briefly how you've progressed from then up until the beginning of lockdown?
Okay, so I had 2 strokes, and I had my first stroke in 2015, and I was just I was 40, and that was a bilateral thalamic stroke, and then I had a second stroke about 8 months later in 2016, and that was a smaller stroke, but in the cerebellum. The first stroke had me in hospital for a month, and I had to relearn to walking. I couldn't walk properly. I had to relearn to walk. So I'd had physio for quite a long time afterwards, relearning to walk. I had quite severe weakness in my left-hand side, which it's still there today, although I do walk with an AFO, and I am driving again and everything, although I have got it modified so I'm one-handed and it's an automatic. The second stroke was less of a stroke, but my main symptoms then were speech, and I had some speech therapy back at the time, because I couldn't get the words out correctly, or finding the right word, and I sound very slurred at times even now, especially when I'm tired, because all my symptoms come much worse when I'm tired. So that's, like I say, 5 years ago. So that's about, I've had a lot of rehab with the walking and Pilates and yoga and strength training, most of it funded myself. I think I got to actually learning to walk was provided sort of, but most of it's been provided myself, to be honest.
Right. Did you get the initial 6-week early discharge care when you came out?
That's right, yeah. And then I had the 6 weeks when they visited at home. I didn't drive after the first stroke for about a year, but my dad took early retirement. I have 2 children who at the time were both in primary school, and my strokes was in July, so it just came up to the school holidays. So my dad took early retirement to look after me and the children, because my husband needed to continue to work, and he used to take me to the outpatient facility for rehab, and that went on for quite a while because I was quite young and they wanted me to walk and get mobile again because of the children. So I did get an extended time in rehab, on the outpatients side of things.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
What sort of things did they try in rehab? Did you have any electrical stimulation? Or?
No, I didn't have electrical stimulation. I was in their gym. They had a fully equipped gym, so I would go along and I would be on their treadmills, with a physio one-to-one for walking. I had a problem with the heel to toe walking sort of roll, and I still have foot drop now, and then I was doing things like just using the bars to actually walk straight in a straight line, and then balance balls to try and get some core strength back, and then I'd go into what they called their workshop, where I'd do hand exercises with the putty, shown how to use that, and they'd have on the wall they'd have like screws that were screwed into the wall that I had to unscrew with my weak side, and things like that. So, and again, that was all one-to-one with physios. So my rehab at the hospital was really good, as you know, I can't fault that.
Yeah. And was that at Addenbrooke's or?
No, because I'm living in Rutland, I'm between sort of four big counties. So I initially was at Peterborough, that was the first hospital. Then they transferred me to Addenbrooke's because that's all Cambridge. But my rehab was at Leicester because I fall under Leicester Hospital Trust. So yeah, so I was a bit scattered, but I had a very supportive GP that kept pushing me back and sending me back whenever you know, they were coming to an end. My GP would request that, no, actually this isn't good enough, and I get more appointments. So I was,
yeah,
yeah,
it's so worth pushing, and like you say, having somebody on your side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see from the Facebook group and everything, it's such a postcode lottery on who gets good rehab and who gets poor rehab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's so unfair. My stroke was it's going back to 1999. So before there was any government input into stroke rehabilitation and everything. So I felt I was really lucky that I got the input that I did, and it was because of a supportive GP. Whereas I think a lot of people are just sent home even now, and if they can walk, they're left to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's.
I think because initially when I had the first stroke, it took a few days to get diagnosed. I was misdiagnosed with migraine, and it wasn't until the second MRI scan that everything happened really fast, and I was transferred, and I had lots of consultants flying around very suddenly. But I think for me, because I was younger and I had a young family, I always felt that the consultants were very, if I said sympathetic, or very hopeful of what they could do with the right rehab. I kind of always felt I was supported that way. And again, with the physiotherapists that I saw, because I was so young, they hadn't all met someone so young and had a family, and yeah, I just think I was fortunate.
Yeah.
That's it all, really.
Yeah. So initially, they just thought you had migraines or cluster migraines. I've heard
hemiplegic migraine was my first, and I was kind of sat in a side room, left. It wasn't until my mum arrived, and I don't recall, but I didn't recognise who she was. But then they did sort of like, my mum sort of kicked off and demanded more tests, and that's when it all sort of fast forwarding a little bit.
Did you have extreme headache?
No.
No.
When I woke up in the morning, so going back to the stroke, it was a very hot summer's night. I remember that, and my daughter at the time was 7, and I remember about midnight just going to check that her window was closed, but she wasn't covered in the duvet. So I hadn't gone to bed yet, and I went to see and check she was all right. And I remember getting up and not being able to walk properly and just sort of stumbling around, but I didn't think any more of it. And then I got back to my bed, and then I don't really recall anymore, but my husband found me in the morning, and he couldn't wake me up, and he said I was sort of laid on the end of the bed, sort of propped up against the bed's end, and he said I couldn't rouse me. And when he did rouse me, I was speaking as though I was severely drunk, and all I remember in my head is that I couldn't think, and everything was really thick, and it was like walking through treacle or something. And we obviously have 2 kids to get to school, so the whole school routine is that I just couldn't function to get the kids to school or walk properly, and it was like I was just falling into doors and falling here, and you know, just struggling so he called my mum, and I got taken to the doctors, and that's when they said, oh no, it's just a migraine. But I couldn't walk properly at all. I was having to be guided. I couldn't get my feet to walk in the right direction. And I just felt like I was the most drunk I'd ever been in my life. And I couldn't recall any of, they keep asking you loads of questions of what day of the week is it? What's your name? Who's the Queen? Who's the Prime Minister? And I couldn't answer anything with anything sensible. And then when I got to the hospital, the first question was, have you taken anything? I'm implying it's some sort of drug induced.
Yeah.
You know, that I've taken something that I really shouldn't. No. Have you been drinking? No. And then there was just loads of questions and questions and questions. And then they just said, I had the CT scan, and while we waited those results, they just saying it was a migraine. And like I say, it wasn't until I had the MRI that they then fast forwarded and it all got very serious fast. So
okay. And Adam Brooks, they wanted to retrieve the clot.
Yeah, so I arrived, so I think I was too late for the newer clot busting drugs, because I'd had it in the night and it was now like 24 hours later. So they were going to do, I think it's called a craniotomy, to take it out, but they eventually decided after prepping and talking, and that's what they were going to do, that in actual fact that they weren't going to do that. But a whole time I'm just spaced out. It's all very, I remember being at Adam Brooks because I was told I was there. And then I spent time in various wards in there, so from the more critical end. And then I moved to their rehab the centre in hospital for a week. And then I came back to the local hospitals. And then I eventually came home. So yeah.
Wow.
I didn't see my kids for over 2 weeks because I was so ill, and I had my birthday in hospital. So yeah, it was all a bit. I came home and couldn't drive and couldn't do the kids, and we couldn't go on holiday. Like I say, my dad took early retirement because we have our own business, me and my husband. And he was the one who could most easily finish work in our little family. There's only my sort of 4 and my mum and dad locally, so he took early retirement to look after the kids over the school holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did your relationship with your children feel? Like you said, you couldn't see them for 2 weeks. Were they very scared, or?
My daughter's, so she was 7 at the time. My son was 9. Yeah, my son was 9. Yeah, they were just, Mummy just disappeared. You know, Mummy put them to bed, and then Mummy wasn't there for a month, and life changed significantly when I got home. I couldn't do any of the things that I would normally do in school holidays, like trips away. We would normally go on holiday for 2 or 3 weeks, and we'd be on the beach, and the kids would be doing loads of activities. So the kids' life changed a lot. I couldn't do the ballets, the dance classes, the swimming classes. Like, my dad had to pick it all up from scratch. My daughter suffered quite a lot emotionally. She had some packs from yourself on dealing with strokes for children.
The
and
children's resources.
That's the one, yeah. So she'd fill in how she felt and how things had changed. And even now, 5 years later, we'll still dig it out every now and again. She came back to wanting to sleep in bed with Mummy, not leave Mummy. And, you know, she was like, then she'd want to do everything for me that I couldn't do. She was always fetching and carrying and X and Y. And so it's impacted her quite a bit. 5 years later, we've come through the other side. She's grown up, she's 11 now. It's a bad time we talk about, and mummy's not the same as other mummies now. And at times we have, why did it happen to us? But she's okay. My son, I think he's a boy, it kind of went a little bit over him at the time. But we're very close now. I have a very close relationship with them both. And they got used to doing things like watching DVDs in bed with mummy. When mummy was poorly, we'd get in bed and everyone would watch a DVD on the iPad. And if mummy fell asleep, well, that was okay. I think I wasn't probably left alone for about the first year. I didn't have my kids with me. My dad was there. He didn't leave. He wouldn't leave me at all for ages and ages and ages because they were worried it'd happen again. And then just finally, when we got used to getting a little bit of time left, it did happen again. So it kind of knocked us all back, and all the children. I was put on blood thinners straight away, but I was diagnosed post-stroke with APS, which is some blood clotting disease, and AFib, which is a heart beating problem. And that's, they think, the reason I've had the 2 strokes. So they've changed my anticoagulants, and I've been fine since then. So that's what they said.
Good. That's
yeah.
Good. Yeah, so
absolutely.
That was the cause. So what was it called again?
Atrial fibrillation for the heart, and APS, which I think is something like antiphospholipid syndrome.
Oh yeah, antiphospholipid syndrome.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, in a previous life I used to be a nurse, so.
Oh right. Okay. Yeah.
I can remember antiphospholipid syndrome.
And that's something too with
sticky, doesn't it?
Sticky blood. Yes.
That's right.
And sticky blood with a heart condition, undiagnosed, isn't good.
No. Well, fingers crossed now they've got you on the right medication and you're doing okay now. That sounds really good. Well, now shall we move on to good old COVID-19 and the impact that had on family life?
Yeah, so obviously March came, and on a Friday we were all in school, and over the weekend we weren't in school, and then come the Monday. So my daughter was year 6 at the time. She should have done her SATs this year, and had all of her end of school leavers, plays and trips and holidays and visits and whatnot. My son was currently year 9. He was in year 9 at secondary. So 2 different approaches from the schools. If I do my youngest one first, overall they weren't particularly amazing. They would send through about 50 documents on email to be downloaded and printed from home. A lot of the work they sent was just existing SATs papers, but then it became quite apparent that they weren't doing SATs because lockdown was going to go on longer. So my daughter struggled with enthusiasm because school were just sending things that she wasn't interested in doing. So she rapidly lost enthusiasm for school and for doing any work. So the BBC Bite Size provided like quite a good resource, because they do lessons every day, and not just English and maths, many, science and arts and little projects. So she loved that, but we had to change because all of a sudden she had to work more by herself upstairs on her laptop. We're fortunate enough that the kids both have laptops and a desk study area in their room, so, and printers and stuff. I know a lot of people that didn't have printers or any IT. So my daughter worked pretty much alone. School didn't do anything. there was no structure, there was no schedules, there was no particular feedback of if she'd done anything. I had one phone call in 5 months, so that was her. So she was pretty much left, we were left just to do her education ourselves. There was no transition to secondary. She was allowed to go back after the last half term, so sort of the beginning of June, for about 6 or 7 weeks. However, I've been shielding and was told to continue shielding, so we had a lot of conflict whether she should go back or whether she shouldn't. We decided in the end she did the last 2 weeks, so she got offered 2 days a week. She went in for the last 4 days just to have a bit of closure on primary school and life. They had an elite.
I'm so sorry for them, particularly the ones ending like years 6 and years, is it year 11 and
year 11,
where they have their proms and
all of those special things didn't happen. Amelia did go in for her end of year awards ceremony. It was all different. We weren't in church and there was no parents, but she did go in, she did win an award, and she had a leavers disco, but there was only 15 of them having a disco, so it was all very different, but she did go. The whole returning home from school, she was hand sanitized. Hand sanitizer is my best friend now. It's everywhere. Everyone gets hand sanitized before they come home or come in the house, and then everyone has a change of clothing before they're allowed upstairs or past the front door, really. So that's all changed. Uniforms all like washed daily, so increase of washing and stuff. My son, who was at secondary school, his system was a lot better, so his learning became online, and I didn't have to plan or schedule or even look at what he was doing, because he was told each day. The teachers would set the work, provide the work, mark the work. So his learning has continued. For me, it was just hard checking he was doing the work, and also when he got stuck on quadratic equations and he'd come down saying, "Mom, how do I do this?" That was, most of us can't remember any of our science or history or geography or maths, but that was really hard, having to read the examples and the text, try and process it and help him work it out. So school were good, so when we had problems I just would email his teacher and then they'd provide more support. But we had to do a lot of, and my husband too would have to sit and work with my son on the maths and science. And so his was just managing what he was getting, ensuring it was done and shouting out for help when we couldn't do it ourselves. But some days my husband would spend sort of 2 or 3 hours in the evening working on like his maths problems, etc. My husband also, so we have a business in a local town. We closed our office, so he was then working from home. So that was another body in the house. And for me, although managing the children, their learning, or finding stuff for my daughter to do, I had no time for any rest. So the fatigue has been awful this summer. I normally, my routine pre-lockdown would be get up and get the kids out to school in the morning, maybe do whatever needed doing in the morning myself, but be home by 11, half 11, and then rest until I had to pick up at 3:30, so the kids wouldn't see me being in bed and tired, and therefore in the children's eyes Mummy was okay, because Mummy wasn't falling asleep at 6 o'clock or having to go to bed. when they were at home. So for me, it was for the children to see that mummy isn't always as well as mummy is, because mummy was suddenly going to bed in the afternoon because I was so tired, and then obviously there was no school happening, so there was no time.
Yeah, it is amazing how people do put on a, not pretending, you want to show the best side to your loved ones, because you want normality, don't you, for them?
When the children think mummy's okay, life's so easier, they go to bed, they sleep. So if mummy's okay, then life in the house is much better. But I've been so exhausted this, you know, and it goes on and on and on and on, and there's no rest. So I was shielding, so I didn't go out. So I was fortunate enough to get a Tesco's home delivery. So they were delivering food, so we didn't have to go out. My mum and dad deliver and collect, so if I'm having times, my mum will cook meals for the kids, just to help fatigue. She still does all of that. I didn't go out for ages, so mentally it's hard, it's just difficult. Eventually I would just go for a walk. I live quite fairly in a small town, but I'm rural, so I can be in fields in a few minutes. So I'd walk my dog in the field just for some, you know, fresh air, or to get the kids to come out, because the kids got scared of bringing COVID home and making mummy ill, and mummy might have to go to hospital, and we don't know what will happen. So yeah, it was all just stressful and tiring. Yeah, tiring's the most.
How do you feel now that the restrictions are being lifted? Do you feel more confident to go out, or you still half anxious not to go?
Yeah, so there are a few places I've been into, but I haven't really been anywhere. I do wear a mask whenever I leave the house. I do hand sanitize. I have popped in to collect, you know, a pint of milk from the M&S garage a few times, but I haven't really been anywhere else. If it's outside, I'm okay. I've got 2 dogs, so I do have a lot of walking outside. I think we've been out for 1 or 2 meals with the children more recently. But again, sitting out, I think I've sat outside every time, in a garden. I think we have, yeah. I'm more anxious that I'm back to school yesterday and today, and they're in social bubbles of 240 children each, so that's 500 children they'll be moving around their school with. So that's quite worrying. Well, not worrying is too strong. It's just, I'm not sure how it will work.
Yeah.
But we're told that children, it's difficult for children to catch it, and if they catch it, they have minor symptoms. But then we're equally told that they can then transmit it to grandparents or vulnerable people, and they can get it just the same. So it's all a bit conflicting.
Yes, yeah.
The news advice is conflicting. So I don't know. It's got to happen, and I feel my children need to go back to school. They need their structure. They need their friends. They need to be in a routine, and they need to be getting their education. They just need the wellness, the support, all of it. They need to be in school.
Yeah.
They need to get their lives back together. However, it's we're told that, you know, the R level is just as high as it has been, and so I don't understand. It just seems a mismatch. But then it's a mismatch with people going back to work as well. So yeah. I think it's just taking it as we come. And
yeah, there was a virologist on the TV yesterday, and he was trying to explain it and make it sound less worrying than a lot of us could be anxious. And he was saying your children going to school are not necessarily going to catch it, and if they do, they would only be a contact, not necessarily a carrier. If anybody was to contract it, then you were to isolate them like you would if they had diarrhea and vomiting, that kind of thing. So I think I was more reassured.
There's so much information, and it's hard then to know which is the right bit of information, because there's so much that's out there.
And plus we don't know, do we? It's an unproven thing.
We've had flare peaks around Europe this summer, and countries and borders have been closed. And then I haven't understood how we can close a border in 48 hours, but everyone can come back. But if you come back 10 minutes after quarantine, you have to go into lockdown. So I struggled with that. But overall, I'm glad they're back in school. It's the right thing, so long as we can keep the, local lockdowns safe.
And like you say, keep with the hand sanitising. And are you still having the supermarket delivery and things like that, so you don't have to go into higher risk environment?
No, so I'm not. So school uniform, I've shopped everything online. So everything's online, and the delivery people are coming to the house to collect my parcels to take them back. So they'll just wait outside, so I don't have to go to a post office, I don't have to go to the supermarket. Like I say, there are a few places I've popped into that have a lot lower people in the shops. So, but my parents, they'll pop to the shops for me. They'd rather pop and get what I need than me go. Unfortunately enough, my son's 14, he can pop. I can drive to a supermarket, he can pop in, get hand sanitized before he gets back in the car, and then he'll put the shopping away. I've had periods over lockdown where we've hand sanitized all the supermarket shopping as it gets delivered. So the kids have done things like that, but we are reducing things like that now. So as the supermarket shopping gets delivered, the children still put it away, but they're not having to spray everything and anti-bac the boxes. We're getting a bit better. So hopefully things will turn to a bit more like normal, but I think we've definitely got a new normal.
That good old phrase, new normal.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When all this does settle down, say it might even be 18 months, 2 years, and we have got the virus under control, what would you be looking forward to most?
Going out and not having to use the masks, because my speech is a little slurred. Speaking through a mask is another thing, another obstacle. Sometimes understanding other people is a bit harder because they're wearing a mask and you can't see their mouth or their expressions. So I'm struggling at times and I feel, I keep asking, it's not awkward's not the right word, but I'm aware, I'm probably more aware than they're aware, but there's that. Going on holiday, that would be nice. Being able to travel more, but getting the kids back to school and normal is a big one for me. So that's happening now. So I don't know, I'm not really looking forward to anything. I find at times my emotions are a bit bleh, I'm just like in the middle of it all. But just having some time to myself would be nice. Today's my first day of however long, because they're both in school. So
are you going to go and have a nap after we've stopped talking?
The house is so quiet today. It's nice, but quiet.
Yeah. Your
Yeah.
poor dogs are probably wondering where everybody's gone.
Yeah. They've been walked to death this summer because everyone's taken them for a walk to get 5 minutes by themselves. So
Yeah.
they're both asleep at my feet, so they're having a quiet moment.
All right. And up until recently, the weather has been so nice, hasn't it?
It has. I think mentally, if people are still in that half shielding sense, I think the winter will bring a lot of depression on. People that are who have mobility problems, I think going out in the cold and wet, it just makes it harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on top of it, you're risking COVID. So I think it's worrying for people who do have some form of disability to get, because it's there in the back of my mind. I don't. So although I am mobile, I have times when I'm much weaker, but falling now and hurting myself and having to go into hospital with COVID around, I'd probably rather not go out in the first place. So I'm aware of.
Yeah, just that little bit of extra anxiety for that, yes.
Yeah, there are places that I won't go because I don't want not only of risk catching COVID, but of risk falling. So things I might have done, I'll probably not bother because there's now a risk attached with it.
Yeah. Does the cold affect you? Do you find that cold?
I am cold. I am always cold. So since I've had the stroke, I've lost my hot and cold sort of switch. So I'm always piling on the hoodies and the sweatshirts. But although before my stroke, I used to love the snow and wet, real frosty. When I was younger, I worked abroad in cold countries. So I do love a good cold winter, but now the risk of falling is not worth.
Yeah, just takes
the fun
out of it, doesn't it? A shame.
It is, yeah. Yes, something else that goes by the wayside.
Yeah, to enjoy it by watching it on TV.
Absolutely, yeah. And it'll be nice to get back to the gym and swimming. It will be nice to do those things when we come out of lockdown. And although those places are open now, I personally don't feel ready to go, for swimming or anything like that. I use swimming as rehab on my hip. So when my leg goes, it affects my knee and it affects my hip. And then it will affect my other hip because it overcompensates. So I use swimming as rehab. I used to do Pilates for rehab. I would have physio Pilates, but now that's all stopped and I personally don't feel ready to go back. So yeah, I'm much stiffer all the time now. I can feel my hips.
Have you been watching the no, I shouldn't say watching. Have you been taking part in exercises that we've been putting on the Facebook page?
I haven't no, if I'm honest, no, I haven't. I have done some online yoga that I bought a course at the beginning of lockdown. So I have been trying to do yoga. I'm trying to do just my simple stuff, when I'm at the stuff that I was doing at the beginning of rehab. So just circling my ankles to keep my ankles going.
Maybe take a look at the Tai Chi.
Right,
it's
okay.
really gentle.
Yeah.
And Dr. Giles explains the movements so slowly and so carefully that if you enjoy Pilates, I think you really enjoy the Tai Chi and sitting down and then progress to standing. So maybe have a little look.
Yeah, I will do. Yeah. But yeah, so it's fine. We're all right.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah, I think so.
You look really well today. So thank you very much for sharing your story. As I said to you before we started recording, it's fascinating for me how we are all made the same, but when we have a stroke, it can affect us all so differently. And your thalamic stroke, I thought was incredibly rare, but the more people I speak to, the more I'm finding out that it's such a minute part of our brain, but it can affect you, globally. It can affect everything. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. No, you're
Um,
welcome.
you're an inspiration. You've gone on to do lots of things for yourself, as well as having the support from your doctors and your nurses. But I know you've been very proactive in helping yourself, and I think that goes a long way to the recovery.
It
So,
does.
so thank you
Yeah.
for sharing.
No, you're welcome. Thanks.
And I'm going to stop the recording in a second. And
Okay.
thank you very much for now. Thank you.
Thanks.